This happened about 8 years ago when I was attending college in Tampa, Florida. My roommate and I, both females, lived in a large apartment complex about 10 minutes from campus. We always felt safe in the complex as it was right next to one of the top Air Force bases in the country, and there were lots of military personnel in the complex. We lived there for almost a year without incident. One day my roommate and I were both home and decided that we needed to do laundry. As it is common in a lot of those large open apartment complexes in Florida, there were several laundry huts located all around the complex. The closest one to our apartment was about a 2 to 3 minute walk away. While we were originally bringing our laundry down to the hut, we threw it in the back of my roommate's car and drove it down, just so it was easier. We then walked back and forth to change it out and pick it up. We finished, folded, and put our laundry away and continued on with our day. My roommate worked for a breakfast place in downtown Tampa. She'd often have to leave our apartment at 5 a.m. to be there for the early shift. She got in her car the very next morning and drove to work. On the way, she notices a light blue piece of fabric stuck in the corner on her windshield, right in between the hood of the car and the glass. She makes a mental note to get it off her car when she parks at work, but is half asleep and forgets. At the end of her shift, she is driving home, notices the fabric again and removes it from her car when she pulls into our lot. She realizes it's a thong and flings it on the ground. I was upstairs waiting for her to get back so we could go to lunch. She comes up laughing and grossed out that she just found a pair of underwear on her car. We go out to leave and she points it out, and we realize that they were mine. We laughed it off again. I thought I dropped them when we were unloading the laundry and forgot about it. 2 days later, she goes out to her car very early in the morning and there's another pair of underwear in the same exact spot. Only this time, it's a pair of hers. Now we are starting to get a little freaked out. She and I had very different schedules. I would often come home late at night, 2 to 3 a.m. Hey, I was in college after all. I got in the habit of checking her car late at night to make sure there was no more rogue underwear left there. Each time I'd look, there'd be nothing. A few days after the second pair was found, I did my nightly check for her car. Nothing. 2 to 3 hours later, she emerges from the apartment, and there's another pair. Same exact spot. This time, it was a dark blue colored pair and we noticed the stains. We decided enough was enough and called the police. While we waited for them to get there, I'd been watching a lot of SVU at the time. I took photos and placed the underwear in a plastic bag while wearing gloves. The cops get there, essentially do nothing. They leave and send us to the station to fill out a report. We've now figured out that it has to be a neighbor and they must have been watching us somewhat to know what our schedules were. The very next morning after the cop came by, my roommate goes out to her car for work. She comes running back upstairs and tells me I need to come outside. There in a heap on the back of her trunk are about 10 more pairs of our underwear. Every single time they placed them on the car, they were always on the front hood in the same spot. This time the culprit pointedly dropped them in a completely different spot. He was somewhat ritualistic about what he was doing. It was as if to say, I saw the police yesterday here, just have the rest of them. It confirmed he was watching us, knew our schedules, etc. Creepiest thing that has ever happened to me, and he was molesting our underwear. So, underwear sniffer, let's not meet. Back with another story since y'all asked nicely if I'd recount the story that led me to finally quitting my driving job. A few weeks after the Agnes situation, we got a new director and a new charge nurse. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe things got better and patients sneaking off in vans would be things of the past, you'd be wrong. Neither gave a shit about the patients under their care. In fact, both were carrying on an affair with each other, which led them to be let go from their previous employer. They liked to stay holed up in the director's office pretending to work. So onto the story, I pulled up Saturday morning to utter chaos. It turns out that a patient got out of his room. Not just any patient though. A patient who for the past 2 weeks hadn't been receiving his meds for his paranoid schizophrenia because the head nurse didn't believe he suffered from it and was being over-medicated. Not to mention the patient had on his chart that he is extremely combative and needs medication, and Nurse Ratchet decided that he didn't need it to cut costs. This guy had caught an unaware janitor and beat him pretty good with a mop bucket, and he's loose. Obviously the police were called, right? Nope. The board of directors told the staff that nobody was to call the police except for him, and that was only a last resort. The poor janitor, who was bloody and battered, is taken to the medical bay so Nurse Ratchet can fix him up. Meanwhile, I'm asked to join the search for the patient, so 2 orderlies, our security guard, who was pushing 70, and I start looking. Against my better judgment, we break off into our groups of 2, opening doors and calling the patients' names. We go into the first cafeteria in the dementia ward, the ward that housed the residents with memory loss. more severe physical issues, and anyone like Agnes who tended to wander off. Except the design was flawed as heck. Residents still got in and out, but in the cafeteria or the big rec rooms, the door would look behind you, so somebody would have to come let you out if you got locked out. So we were in the cafeteria looking around, and I hear a huge bang from the kitchen, like somebody pushing over something heavy. The orderly, like an idiot, presses his radio, and the second the patient hears that sound, he's moving towards us with a huge metal soup ladle and a Phillips screwdriver in hand. Thankfully, they keep the knives locked up. I'm a big guy, but this patient was easily 6'5" and 350 plus pounds. The orderly is radioing for help, and I'm throwing things at this guy who's got murder in his eyes. No lie, I've seen some messed up stuff in the Marines, but this guy's dead eyes will haunt me forever. Then he's on me, and I'm doing my best to keep him from gutting me with a screwdriver when he just starts choking me with his bare hands, and I'm getting some good punches in, but he's feeling no pain. The orderly realizes, shit, I'm getting choked to death, and he jumps on his back and starts wailing on this guy. I blacked out, and when I woke up, I was being put on a stretcher. My trachea was so bruised, I couldn't talk past a whisper for weeks. I came very close to dying. Thankfully, the orderly got a hold of a cast iron pan and whacked the patient unconscious. As you can imagine, both the director and the charge nurse were let go and included in a lawsuit brought against them and the board of directors of the long-term care facility by me, the janitor, the orderly, and the family of the patient. It also caused a huge shakeup in the facility, and I've heard since then things have run a whole lot better. As for me, I quit, even though I was offered a raise. I hear the patient got back on his meds and was eventually released into the care of his family. Regardless, let's not meet ever again. Yesterday morning, I was unfortunate enough to suffer a power cut, and spending my day in total darkness isn't something I enjoy. I ended up wandering around town throughout the day to kill some time. After spending a few hours in my old university, I decided I should get a hotel for me and my dog, as the power outage was expected to last a few days and we live in the South where no AC can be a big issue. I finally managed to find somewhere nearby that would book me and my pup without costing us a few arms and legs. And that's when everything started to go downhill. I would need to get a cab from my old school back home and then to the hotel. Everything is within 3 miles of each other, and I figured it would be simple. I wasn't aware that there was a late graduation ceremony going on, so every time I tried to call a cab, they wouldn't show up, or somebody else would take them. When the sun was starting to set, I found somebody who was a previous classmate of mine. They gave me a ride home and I packed up my stuff. I called another cab and lo and behold, it didn't feel like coming, and since Uber wasn't working, I decided I would take my bag, my pup, and myself, and walk my happy butt a mile or so to the hotel so that she could have a good rest. I started walking, and about a fourth of the way there, I hear somebody behind me enter my nightmare. A 6-foot-something brick house of a person with a grisly look about them. They looked me up and down and said, "Hey there, girl, where are you going?" Now, let it be known, I am new to this area. I am from the middle of nowhere, and this is horrifying to me. I decided my options were to be incredibly polite or to run screaming, so I fell back on politeness. After rejecting him taking my bags multiple times, he stated that he was walking to the place right next to my hotel, so I decided I would try to humanize myself as much as possible and keep a dialogue going between us. He asked me many questions about family, friends, and why I was here. I made up a bit of a story that I had family and I was here for graduation, so that it seemed like I had people who would know I was expected. Shortly after this, he reaches into his pocket and says, "You might need this," as he hands me a small knife. Not knowing what to say, I thank him a few times. Moments later, he is talking to himself before looking at me and inviting me to live with his niece and her boyfriend. Internally, I am screaming. I know I could do nothing. This guy has at least 1.5 feet on me and I'm exhausted. We continue walking as he tells me he gets a good vibe from me and he could see us in a relationship and with a family. He keeps muttering to himself about tons of stuff, people and girls. It was very hard to understand everything. He then looks at me and says, "I had an epiphany." And I said, "Oh." He just smiled and did a head shake and kind of chuckled to himself, muttering, "Good night." I figure it's all right. We're about halfway there and I am holding a conversation, listening to how he went to prison for 2 years over a gun and how Snoop Dogg dedicated a song to him. We get to a very dark part of the walk and he looks at somebody walking towards us and pushes me to the side of the sidewalk that is away from the street and says, "You walk here now, because you're mine, little girlie." Suddenly, people walking to their cars from graduation walk past us. I feel safer and I know I'm home free. As we approach the hotel parking lot, he asks if he can join me. I make up some excuse about how it's only booked for one person and It's not in my values. He follows me into the lobby, follows me to the front desk. I am told I can't stay because I am 20, not 21, and they had a recent policy change. My heart sinks. He is attached to my side and I can't tell anybody. I am terrified. I see a worker at another desk and say, "I'm going to the bathroom," I whisper to her. "Please, can I talk to you somewhere? I am in a small emergency." She escorts me away and I explain that he's been following me. She has me sit down and he is trying to talk to another person into using their ID for what he is now calling our room. A woman employee walks over and says, "Do you know this girl?" And he replies, baffled, "Yeah, this is my girl. We've known each other for years." She looks at him and asks my name. "She's my girl," he says. She tells him if he doesn't leave the lobby, police will be called. It ends up that she is the bartender. She sits me down and ends up helping me to get to my room, and I fully intend to thank her and the other woman properly. After an hour sitting in the bar and her negotiating my stay, she looks at me and says, "If you wouldn't have been able to stay, I would have paid for you or taken you home because he is still out there. He has still been outside on and off since this morning, so." Good vibe, knife man. Although you are determined to try, let's not meet again, please. I'm still shaken up. This just happened to my friend Aaron and me this afternoon. Usually, stories like this take place in a dark alley or in the creepy setting of some deserted place, but no, not this time. I don't even feel safe anymore. I just moved to college. I'm 8 hours away from home, sitting in my dorm room still shaking. I want to cry. I've only been on campus for 5 days. Okay, sorry for the rant. I'm just in shock right now. Today, my friend Aaron and I had some downtime, so we decided that we should explore the campus and find all of our classes for the coming Monday. That is our official first day of classes, so we knew where they were. It was around 7 p.m., but not dark yet. The sun was getting low in the sky, but it was a nice evening. People were out walking, and construction guys were still working, because it was so cool out, which is really unusual for an August day in the rural American South. Aaron and I go to map out his schedule. He is a computer science engineering major, so we had to go to this huge chemistry building to find his chemistry lecture hall. The first building he went to was a failed attempt. It was the wrong place. We walked across the street to another building which opened up into this huge auditorium looking place. It was dead inside, probably because it was 7 p.m. during the summer, but it was still unlocked to us. It was eerily silent inside, way too quiet. Aaron and I walked around looking for somebody to help us find his chemistry class. There was a guy in a janitor's uniform sitting near the rear exit of the place. When he saw us come in, he sort of stiffened. He sat bolt right up, eyes wide, and came toward us with rigid movements. I looked at Aaron freaking the heck out, but he was oblivious. He proceeded to ask the guy if he knew where the appropriate building was, and the janitor guy told him, with his eyes still wide as saucers. He talked in a thick accent that made it hard for me to understand him. As he told Aaron where the building was, I saw the door behind the janitor slowly creep open. It made no sound, but I saw another guy in a janitor uniform standing in a crowded utility closet. I almost crapped myself. I still don't know why he was in there, but Aaron saw him, and that was enough for him. We quickly thanked the guy and left. We followed the man's instructions because they were leading us in the right direction. We saw the huge chemistry building and took a left, expecting to go to the entrance, but were instead directed into a shady-looking back lot that seemed to be very much out of the way. That's when I hear a heavy voice about 50 yards to my left. "Hey, you lost?" A third guy in a janitor's uniform is leaning against a dumpster and is smoking calmly. I suddenly realize that we are cut off from civilization. Then I hear footsteps, heavy and quick, coming down the walkway. I pulled Aaron with me and we scrambled for anywhere that we could find. We ran to the doors and pulled on each of them. They were all locked. I was frantic. Finally, we climbed a flight of stairs and found an open entrance to the basement of some unnamed building. From there, we called campus security and told them about the janitors, and we were horrified to find out that, of course, there were no janitors. The building was closed all summer due to some damage sustained the previous year. It had been empty for a long time. I used to think stuff like this didn't happen. I mean, yeah, but it was broad daylight. We were minding our own business. Those weirdos sent us there to, I guess, rob us, harm us? I really don't know. I just want to go home now. I don't feel safe here anymore. Don't talk to strangers no matter how old you are. This is the scariest episode from my childhood. It took place in 1991 when I was 8 years old. I lived in a village in the Norwegian countryside with my parents and 2 older brothers. There weren't many kids around for us to play with, so we always stuck together, despite the age difference. I was 8 and my brothers were 10 and 12. It was a safe neighborhood and we were outdoorsy kids. It was fine for us to just return home to eat and then go back out to play again in the woods or go fishing in the nearby lake. In the autumn of 1991, my oldest brother dared us to sneak through the hedge to the abandoned property that was located close by. We had always thought of it as a haunted house, but really, it was the old house where the man who started the village brick factory once lived. Nobody had lived there for ages, and the paint was starting to peel off, and several windows were broken. Our parents would tell us to never go there. Their reason was, of course, that they feared we would get hurt by playing there, but we thought it was because it was haunted. But that day, we dared to walk around in the garden, or whatever you want to call it. It had a now dried up pond, an old well, several old and dying fruit trees, and even tools in an old shed. It looked as if somebody had just walked out one day and never returned, leaving everything as it was. We soon came to think of the garden as ours and played there all the time. We climbed the trees and used the tools to build things. It was great, our very own secret playground. We suspected that people in the village had seen us because soon our parents would ask us if we had gone there despite it being strictly forbidden, which of course we denied, but somebody must have complained. We were rather loud and untamed kids. Until one day, it was in November. I remember since it was the days before my birthday. It was a damp and rainy day and we weren't really in the mood for playing outside. But our mom had chased us out of the house so she could clean in peace and we weren't allowed back until an hour later. So we decided to try and open the old cellar. I'm not sure what the word is in English for this kind of cellar, but imagine, if you will, a hatch that opens almost horizontally to the ground, then a few steps that lead you down into a dugout cellar with stone walls and an earth floor. It was used to store vegetables and such, but was empty now. All of us climbed down to have a look. The plan was to write our names on the inside of the cellar and mark it as our own, sort of. Suddenly, the hatch slammed shut above us, and the cellar became completely dark. I started screaming, and my older brothers tried to open the hatch. When my oldest brother, Sindre, pushed the hatch open, he saw a man's hand holding a small axe. "Come on out, trespassing little brats," the voice growled. "The axe close to the opening of the hearth." "Heck no," Sindre shouted back, and slammed the hatch shut from the inside. "Alright then. I know you're all in there. All 3 of you little shits. Does your mommy know where you are? I bet she doesn't. Nobody will look for you." We heard him dropping the axe and starting to move around with something else. Soon, we realized that he had taken out a hammer and, before we knew it, he had started to nail the hatch closed. I threw myself at the hatch, determined to get out, but the moment the hatch opened just a tiny bit, he reached for the axe. "Come on now. Come on out. It's the better choice, really. It must be awfully dark and damp in there. Aren't you afraid of the dark? Go on, let your little brother out." He laughed, and we could hear that he was obviously drunk. My other brother, Emil, was pleading with the man to let us go, promising that we would never return, but his words fell on deaf ears. The rain had started to fall really heavily now, and we heard thunder outside. The drunk man with the hammer was cursing and moving around outside, clearly bothered by the bad weather. "I might come back to let you out one day, or maybe I'll butcher all 3 of you," he whispered through the wooden door as he hammered the hatch shut. We were too terrified to do anything, but Sindre told us to keep calm and it would be okay. He was surely just out to scare us. The dark was compact inside the cellar, and it was cold and damp. After a long while of silence from the man outside, we started to wonder if he had left. Sindre decided that we should count to 100 and then try to get out. We counted loudly and then used our hands to find the hatch. It was definitely nailed shut. Sindre told us to feel the stone walls for a loose stone, and we did, cutting our palms up on the sharp edges. Eventually, we did find one, and it was surprisingly easy to remove it from its place. The cellar was old and had not been tended to for ages, and the rainy climate of the Norwegian coast side had left the wooden hatch doors rather soft with age. The hardest thing was to reach up. The cellar was built in such a way that it was almost impossible to get a good forward motion going in order to break the wood, but fueled by panic and adrenaline, we broke the lower half open, being closest to the ground. It was softer and easier to tear apart. We started digging the earth with our hands, creating a small opening. Being the smallest, my brothers pushed me out of the cellar, and I could see that the man was indeed gone. My brothers were too big to fit in the small opening, and Sindre said I would have to get the hammer and get the hatch open. I was absolutely petrified that the man would come back with the axe and I would have to run, leaving my brothers to die or stay and be slaughtered. At 8 years old, I had no doubt that would have happened. I got the hammer but couldn't get the nails out, so I used the hammer to simply break the hatch to pieces. Soon, we were all 3 running for dear life across the garden and home, where our mom threw a fit over the state of our clothes and hands and demanded to know what we had been up to. Nothing. We lied, unsure of what to say. We never went back there again, and we never even looked that way. The man with the axe. I have no idea who he was or where he came from. I wonder if he was a drifter living in the abandoned house, not wanting noisy kids to disturb the peace. This is by far the most fearful episode of my life this far. We never told anybody about it, but every year when Sindre, Amel, and I reunite at the family home for Christmas, we like to ask if there is any news about the old ghost house down the street. Did anyone move in there yet?